I'm talking to you right now. If you got a chronic disease and you're not getting rid of your visceral fat, stop complaining. Don't wait for your doctor to tell you to do this because it's literally kept out of medical school. Just get rid of it. I did it for 6,000 Americans. Not one of them had chronic disease that didn't improve. It's time we end humanity's biggest problem, chronic disease. And if you got a form of it, give it a try. It's as simple as just getting rid of your visceral fat, that fat around your heart and the fat in your muscle. The anatomy is this stuff is on the outside where your coronary arteries are, where the heart disease begins. This isn't like omega-3 rich nutrient fat from this beautiful buffalo. This is inflammatory, caustic disease from your poor living as a human being. If you're listening today and you're like in your 50s or 60s, so, well, I'm good. Man, look at me, man. I'm jacked. Guess what? How many 50-year-olds have come to me and didn't look like this? Nobody. Every 50-year-old that's come to me has had this amount of fat around the heart. It doesn't get any more clear than this little mantra here. No heart fat, no heart attack. This needs to be on every billboard around America.
Dr. Sean, it's been quite a while since we last chatted. What new research has taken place in the visceral health realm since then?
I've long been known for my interest and passion to bring awareness about visceral fat. So a lot of people think of me as the visceral fat doctor, and I've worked in this space really close to 13 years more than anybody else, trying to promote awareness and help people eliminate those that find out about it and want to get rid of it. I've developed a lot of expertise. But what's interesting is I'm always gaining these insights about it. And so I have known anecdotally from working with my client patients that nothing else improves people's health, their appearance and performance as much as getting rid of visceral fat and its related forms of fat around the heart, which is called heart fat, and then fat within the muscle, which is called myosteatosis or fatty muscle replacement. So I've been doing that for years. But here's a really cool insight that I hadn't realized. As a health optimizing physician, I have the luxury of being able to follow anything I want as far as metrics and standards for my client patients to optimize their health. I don't own visceral fat. It's not like I invest in it. It's a natural collection of fat. Of really, it's disease inside the human body. It's the best way to think about it. But I don't have like a financial investment in it where I want to be loyal to and say it's the most important. It is the most important thing to follow because nothing else, in my experience, improves human beings as much as getting rid of it. But here's the key insight since we last talked. Everything else I formerly did was lab studies. I'm an MD, conventionally trained allopathic physician. You'd come into me, my emergency room, or you'd see me when I was a concierge physician, providing high-level medical care, kind of a reactive mode, if you will. You come see me and I treat disease. Now I reverse it. I would do a whole bunch of labs on you. And the more money you had, the more I would do. In the ER, the more sick you were, the more I would do. And it'd all be paid for by insurance or the taxpayer if you didn't have insurance. And so I blasted you with labs. That's what doctors know. But the problem with labs is confounding. And the advantage to looking at visceral fat as a biometric, a marker for health, which you should be looking at, the advantage with visceral fat and heart fat, muscle fat, is there's no confounding. So everything else, I'm talking to you who's listening right now, a follower of Jesse Chappis, who's in there in the audience right now. Everything you've ever followed is vulnerable and subject to confounding. And so for those who don't understand what confounding is where confusion gets introduced. So for instance, let's take a look at insulin. Diabetics, may have really low insulin. Type 2 diabetics may have really high insulin. Type 1 really low because they're not making it. Type 2 really high. So you get two different ranges. And let's just say, middle-class America right in the middle. We can increase that insulin because you eat a box, a half a dozen or let's not, let's just say be reality, maybe a dozen Krispy Kreme glazed donuts. So your insulin shoots way up. And so if you're following your insulin, the other thing you need to know is I can also make that insulin shoot way up. Did you know? By sprinting or doing 25 pull-ups, I'll jack your insulin way up. So when you get that insulin marking, that particular factor on a particular day, you got the confluence, Jesse, of all of these different things that's going on in your life. And some of them will raise it, and some of them will lower it, and some of them are good, and some of them are bad. The magnitude of forensic analysis you got to do can't even be done accurately. You ready for this? By even a supercomputer. Because even a supercomputer is subject to how you load that. And let's just say you forget a few things. And now you're supposed to decide how healthy you are by all these different factors and just magically think this number represents where you are in the spectrum of good and bad. So what you want to follow is something that doesn't have confounding. It's just 100% signal, no noise. And for the first time, ladies and gentlemen, that marker that you need to follow is visceral fat, heart fat, and muscle fat, because there's no confounding. So what that means is whatever you do that raises and increases that visceral fat is 100% bad for you, and you don't want to do it. And whatever you do that lowers that visceral fat is good for you, and you want to do it. And ladies and gentlemen, you have been starving your whole life to find out what you have to do to simply find out what it is you got to follow to improve your health. And it's been inside of you your whole life, only it's not shared by your doctor because he or she is not told about it in medical school because the system is suppressing it. And you can find out just with an MRI how much of this fat, this structural disease you have around your heart, how much of this structural disease you have within your abdomen, how much of this structural disease you have in your muscle, and just start living, making those lifestyle choices until it's all gone. And fortunately, we've done it for 13 years. So in my medical practice, we know exactly what you need to do to get rid of it the fastest and what causes it, what increases it. So what I'm presenting to you, Jesse, with absolute clarity for the first time in a podcast is the absence of confounding when it comes to these particular markers of disease, because they are both simultaneously the target to go after and the strategy at the same time. You measure it and you get rid of it at the same time. They're both in it. It's like twice the value in understanding it. And honestly, if you're watching this show, what have you done about it? What have you ever done to look at your visceral fat and the fat around your heart? And so that's the first big point I wanted to make, a big change since we last talked.
All right, I want to be crystal clear on this. I think I know the answer, but have you been able to find one chronic disease that does not relate to visceral fat?
I have not. And the only disease that I've seen is not chronic in nature would be more like trauma, accidents, maybe genetic, but chronic disease related to lifestyle always relates to visceral fat. And that's a really angle, like a tangential. I'm really just realizing it because if you're living incorrectly, you're going to get chronic disease. And it's going to be measured and manifest first as visceral fat heart fat, muscle fat. So it's the first expression of things gone wrong, even before you get symptomatic. So we see it literally starting in toddlers and children. It starts to form from bad lifestyle, from their parents feeding them waffles, pancakes, Fruit Loops, syrup, muffins, all that kind of crap that the kids are now getting today and living incorrectly. So that's a great question. No, I've never found a chronic disease that doesn't relate to it, nor have I ever found a single form of chronic disease that did not improve as you start getting rid of this visceral fat, heart fat, muscle fat. So if you got a problem, here's your choices. I'm talking to you right now. If you got a chronic disease and you don't like it, and you're not getting rid of your visceral fat and your muscle fat and fat around your heart, stop complaining. It doesn't really bother you that much. Don't wait for your doctor to tell you to do this because it's literally kept out of medical school. Just get rid of it and see what happens. I did it for 6,000 Americans. Not one of them had chronic disease that didn't improve. You think you're special? That somehow you're going to be protected from it? I'm sorry. I'm very passionate about this because it's time we end humanity's biggest problem, chronic disease. And if you got a form of it, I'm begging you to give it a try and see what happens when you limit. Quit fooling around with your labs. They're way downstream. You're never going to figure that out. A supercomputer couldn't. It's as simple as just getting rid of your visceral fat, that fat around your heart, and the fat in your muscle. In fact, let me just set it up this new way. I haven't since the last time. The second thing I found out is, Jesse, when it comes to this fat right here, which is this fat around the heart, it's called epicardial adipose tissue, heart fat. I went into AI with its deep research tools, and I said, please review every single medical study that talks about and addresses heart fat, epicardial adipose tissue, and heart attacks, and every medical record, every book, every article, every autopsy record, which are in most states, jurisdictions, public records that AI can get into, and any other record you can get into. And please tell me, out of 8 billion people living today, and all the other billions of people that have lived in the past that we have access to their records, can you find a single human being who's ever had a heart attack and did not have that fat elevated? And do you know what the answer was? For all those billions and billions of people? No. No human being that's had a heart attack has ever not had that heart fat. So why don't you know about it? It's being kept from you. The number one killer of humanity is heart attacks. And this is being kept secret. But now you're watching Jesse Chappis. He's figured this out. He's got interesting guests come on to tell you stuff that you're not going to get through the conventional healthcare system. So I love social media because these influencers are bringing what helps improve lives. It's not being filtered. But I wake up every day trying to end humanity's biggest problem. And so my credibility is my passion to end that problem. I've volunteered for 7 years full time, never taken a pay. How long have you volunteered full time without taking pay? I'm talking to you in the audience. I did it for 7 years, no pay, full time, 4 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's how much I wanted to reverse chronic disease. And the answer is getting rid of this fat.
Okay, it sounds like it. But again, for clarity, before we really get into the nuance here, MRI, gold standard when it comes to looking at visceral fat. As a physician working with clients, are you even doing any other lab work? It sounds like no, but I just want full clarity there.
Boy, was that a great question. No, I'm not. I work with literally 9 people that have 9 figures, billionaires. They ask me the same thing. No, you don't need it. It's just confusing. Everybody else is tracking it. It's the holy grail, Jesse, are these 3 areas of structural disease. They're really the holy grail when it comes to health. So after years, I just cut back on the labs because I've ultimately found out they're just not all that helpful. I used to wear, a GCM for years and track all that stuff way back when. And I realized it really wasn't as helpful as just tracking, the amount of fat somebody has around the heart and then making it go away in 1 year. All that fat around this guy's heart literally disappeared in just one year. And we can do this in months and weeks in many cases. It just happened to be this guy was 1 year.
Okay, so we know the targets: visceral fat, the fat around the heart, fat in muscle, and I know deep subcutaneous fat is another one.
Yeah.
When it comes to accumulation, can we look at one of these areas to get a representation of what's happening in the others?
Yeah. A good surrogate for all of them, I think, is either a single slice through the abdomen that you could do. But, anecdotally, like if you only were to choose one thing, I would say the heart fat. Because when it comes to the belly, it's kind of vague. When it comes to the muscles, like this is the, belly scan now. And then these are the leg scans. It's just something not as powerful about the legs and the abdomen as talking about somebody's heart and how this is the immediate threat. And that honestly is what I can say. The chances are, if Jesse and Sean were to become, worth, $100 million because we guessed right, I think we're going all in that somebody is going to die from a heart attack before anything else. Literally, somebody's having a heart attack every 30 seconds in the United States. It's the number one killer in humanity is heart attacks. So the chances are that's probably how, if you're listening today, probably how you're going to die from a heart attack. So we get your attention with the most important organ, your heart, by showing you this graphic accumulation of this disease, structural disease around your heart, and stop relating it like it's a lab value or just another metric to follow for your health. It's literally disease that is causal and contributing to at the same time so many other forms of chronic disease, including the big triggers. So I would say, with your brilliant question, what's the one thing, if you couldn't look at anything else, it would be a single slice through the heart and show that most immediate threat, and then educate persons that when you get rid of this, you'll also get rid of this, which is visceral fat, and you'll get rid of muscle fat in the legs at the same time. You cannot get rid of heart fat without getting rid of visceral fat and muscle fat and deep subcutaneous fat. They're all connected. They all are related. They're all basically expressions, disease processes, all subsequent to the poor lifestyle choices that people have made in the past.
Can you go back to the picture of the heart for me?
Sure.
So what I'm seeing here, or at least what I think I'm seeing, is the heart being encapsulated with this fat. Talk about the anatomy specifically. Is that penetrating into the heart? Is it just around the heart? And then beyond the physical, what are the chemical changes that are happening there?
God, you're good. So, and by the way, Jesse and I he never comes to me and say, give me some juicy questions. This man's coming up with this from his own cerebral cortex. That's why you're listening to Jesse. That's why I listen
Thank
to him.
you.
So what's happening is on the outside of that heart are the coronary arteries. And maybe I can show a picture, of that right here is a good picture. This is one of the coronary arteries called the left anterior descending. It's also called the widowmaker. A lot of people know it by that term because it's an ominous name. It's a widowmaker because it makes humans widows, women. It kills males first because they put on more of this heart fat and visceral fat than females until menopause. So heads up, ladies, you get a little bit of a respite, a little bye, if you will, biological pass until you hit menopause, and then you put it on faster. You ready? Faster than men do. Your threat starts increasing exponentially faster. So the arteries are on the outside of that heart, and this is somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s. Now you can see the dramatic accumulation of that fat around the artery. And then this is somebody in their 50s who died from a heart attack. And this person's literally their entire surface is now encased in this fat. And we'll say, if you're listening today and you're like in your 50s or 60s, so, well, I'm good. Man, look at me, man. I'm jacked. I'm fit. Guess what? How many 50-year-olds have come to me and didn't look like this? Nobody. Every 50-year-old that's come to me has had this amount of fat around the heart. They just didn't know it. And they're shaking like leaves. And they break down and cry. And some of them even have passed out, literally fainted from the awareness of this disease. So the anatomy is this stuff is on the outside where your coronary arteries are. Those are your arteries for your heart, where the heart disease begins. And so what's happening is the characteristic of this fat is this isn't like omega-3 rich nutrient beneficial fat from this beautiful buffalo. This is inflammatory caustic disease from your poor living as a human being that's very different from fat that's nutritious on wild animals like game meat. This is super. By the way, wild animals don't have this. They have a teeny little bit of it, but humans get this. Wild animals are more like a small amount on their heart compared to, unless you're hunting deer, they get into what? Human crops and start eating monocrops like corn and carbohydrates and grain. Then they start moving more down towards this. But deep, when they don't have access to it, heart's more like that. So when we started researching chronic disease for the National Science Foundation, we look for what happens in the wild and their diet and their lifestyle because they have less of that fat. So besides that inflammation, all that inflammatory fat, it's attacking the arteries on the outside. It also attacks the myocardium. And so on this, right there is about where the left anterior descending artery is, right at that thing. And look at all that fat. It accumulates in the right coronary artery. See that? Fat there, and fat there and fat there. That's exactly what goes on. So the more of this fat, the more disease in those arteries. So the arteries that don't have like a little bit offshoot, without that fat, there's no disease in it. It's that clear. And so it doesn't get any more clear than this little mantra here. No heart fat, no heart attack. This needs to be on every billboard around America. Billboards, commercials. It needs to be the new mantra for humans to understand you can't have a heart attack without this. Cholesterol, you can't say that. There are plenty of people with low cholesterol dropping dead with heart attacks, and plenty of people with high cholesterol that never get heart disease. But there's not a single person in the world or in the history of the world that's ever had a heart attack and didn't have this heart fat. So it's that kind of clarity we need. And if you're listening today and you're ignoring this clarity, let me sum it up this way. I can't help you. There's something else wrong with you. It's that clear. I'm just begging you not to be that person that ignores that kind of clarity and try to turn yourself around. Find out about that heart fat. Get rid of it.
Okay, I need a bit of clarity on a piece of this when it has to do with the heart. So we know that the fat as we're building visceral fat and fat in these different areas of the body that are dangerous, we're getting the fat around the heart. Because the heart is made of muscle itself, and one of the layers of the vessels is actually smooth muscle. And part of this story is the myosteatosis, where our muscle becomes marbled. Do we also have an attack within the vessel and then within the heart muscle itself?
100%. God, you need to be a researcher. 100% accurate. I don't oftentimes talk about it because the smooth muscle, the muscle portion of that, those arteries and veins, and by the way, the capillaries are so small that they don't lend themselves. We can't even see it on an MRI. So I don't have images of it. We'd have to go to a microscope. And maybe the next time I come on with Jesse Chiapas with those kind of questions, I will have histological slides of showing exactly that. So the reason why disease also forms in those walls is of those arteries, capillaries, and veins is it's the largest portion of the wall of the artery of a capillary, a vein, and an artery is the muscle. And so the muscle, just like muscles in your arms and your legs and muscles around your rectum, your anus, start getting attacked with this fat, and then you can't get control of your stool anymore and you're in diapers, is because you've ignored this accumulation of fat within your muscle and you've ignored the accumulation of fat within your coronary arteries muscles. And that fat attacks not only the muscle, but the myocardium. And so what we're also finding out is this inflammatory fat, which releases 24 hours a day, every second, it's releasing cytokines, inflammatory molecules that perturb and cause inflammation of a good, healthy tissue all over the body. It's causing through direct extension, inflammation in the myocardium, in the surface of the heart. So we return back to this healthier picture here. All that muscle tissue, when you got it bathed in that, is now getting inflamed, and the heart doesn't do as well. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're walking up a single flight of stairs and you're short of breath, let me just tell you this. It's not because you're deconditioned. It's not because you don't exercise. I'm not saying that's not a problem. You're short of breath because your daggone heart is like this. And it can't work as well. And so you're just not delivering the oxygen to the boxcars because you got this enormous collection of fat squeezing, constricting, strangulating your heart. And you don't even know about it because your doctors don't even know about it. But that's what's going on. So one of the new things we're seeing exploding all over is AFib, atrial fibrillation, this cardiac dysrhythmia, an unnatural, very dangerous dysrhythmia that's very inefficient, that your heart, instead of beating like this, your heart beats like kind of like this. The atria is beating incorrectly. And if it goes to VFib, you're a dead man. But the atria causes this fibrillation, and it's like just reduces you into a super inefficient cardiac mode. Now your heart is not squeezing as much. And let me tell you about my world in the ER. You're 68, you're 58, you're 92, and you walk in with AFib, and you got rapid ventricular response. You got this very strange rhythm going on. And you know what you come in talking about? Weird stuff. Because suddenly we just turned you into like a moron. We just called altered mental status. We've changed how your brain literally works in seconds from that dangerous rhythm that you've now deteriorated with. But, we're physicians and we can reach into our little magic bag of drugs and temporarily correct that. And within seconds, I would turn them around. Instead of grandpa or dad saying weird things, now he or she starts saying appropriate things just from medicine. But do you think that medicine has solved that problem that caused it? No. It's a temporary treatment. The problem is that inflammatory fat that gets ignored. And I'm sorry, I was that physician who didn't know about it. All the thousands of people that came in with AFib with me, and I just reached in and gave a little calcium channel blocker, a little IV cortisone, and magically made their heart beat a little bit better. Never, ever addressed the underlying cause and triples the risk and maybe even higher risk for stroke, which can completely render you almost brain dead and kill you. So you want to address this problem. You want to reverse this thing. And it hit home with me when one of my very good friends from the Army, who's not even 40, he's 38, just about a month and a half ago, called me up at night and said, I don't feel good. I'm lightheaded. My heart is racing. And look at my Apple Watch. It has this crazy rhythm. And he sent it to me and he was in AFib. I said, okay, here's your choices. You either get right now in your car and go to the ER with your wife driving you, or I'm calling an ambulance. And so he went in the ER. He ended up getting discharged later after they got control of his medicines. And he's been all over the place, Mayo and everything. But he found out none of the doctors ever talked to him about heart fat. And I'm getting a scan for him because he's my friend at a research facility. And in fact, he's coming to me in 2 days for the results of a scan. But if you got AFib and you're listening, or you have a friend that has AFib, or you got a loved one who does, get them to get their heart MRI scan and see all that fat around their heart. Guaranteed, they got all this fat around their heart, and that's what's causing it.
Have you worked in the ER since you've become aware of visceral fat? And the reason I ask that, if not, can you remember back working in the ER and when you're inside bodies, seeing this fat? And at the time, if you weren't aware, obviously you're just pushing it aside and ignoring it.
Yeah.
But talk about that connection.
Yeah. So it was completely ignored. We'd have to trauma patients, somebody who may has a natural condition, and we got to open up their chest because they got a massive blood clot. They have a massive pulmonary embolus. They got a abdominal aortic angina, aorta opens up. We would go into their chest and their abdomen, and they'd be bleeding out. We try to get control. We completely ignored that fat because we weren't taught anything about it. But that was before. Now, since I've been a researcher, when COVID came up and people were dropping dead all over, and we had ICUs that were being, filled with COVID patients, I went in and did some time trying to help out with COVID patients, even with visceral fat. And I could see the ones that died had way higher levels of visceral fat, heart fat, muscle fat than patients who didn't. First of all, I didn't see anybody in the ICU who didn't have that. They all had it. If you got COVID, you're in the ICU, they all had that amount of disease. Now, sometimes, I did some time in the ER when I wasn't in the ICU sometimes because I'm an ER guy and I like fresh problems coming in the door. And the fresh problems come in the door with chronic disease always had elevated amounts. And then you get somebody with like a bad fracture from a car wreck, or they fell out of a coconut tree or whatever the story was, and they didn't have high levels of visceral fat. They were otherwise very healthy, except for this traumatic injury they had. So yeah, before I ignored it because I didn't know anything about it. Then when I knew about it, I'd go back in, I correlated the disease, never, ever saw an exception to that. You got visceral fat, you've had it for a while, it's going to cause disease. So on that point, what do I mean by that? Visceral fat is in and of itself not the problem. It's what it secretes. So the longer you've been subjected to it, the more problematic it is. So look at Jesse. He's healthy. He's svelte. He's a fit-looking, attractive-looking guy. He hasn't had a lot of visceral fat influencing him. I could take an enormous amount, like 15 pounds of this stuff, put it inside in his abdomen. he's going to still look svelte, fit, healthy, attractive. He's going to look like a nice, looking guy. But the longer that stays in there, you watch what the heck happens to that face of Jesse and how he just starts falling apart from that slow influence. So I try to educate my client patients and the audiences when I go in shows. It's the influence of this fat over a period of time. So the longer you've had it, the worse off you are. So if you suddenly go through a lot of stress in 1 year, or 1 month, you'll put on a bunch of that visceral fat, but you may not look that bad. But if you put that same amount on over a longer period of time, you're going to look like Hades. You're going to look terrible because you'll have a longer exposure to those inflammatory molecules. Hopefully that helps.
No, that was great, but it left me with a follow-up question on the timeline. You mentioned a year or a month accumulating this fat if somebody is stressed out. We can use stress. We can use the example you gave earlier of the eating a box of Krispy Kreme donuts. When somebody pushes back and doesn't obey the strategies we're going to get into later, how quickly can this fat accumulate? Somebody like you that doesn't have any or very little, if you ate that box of Krispy Kremes, say on a Friday, by Monday, have you accumulated some of this fat?
We can show through scanning people when they just added in a single dietary change. Like I remember rice was added in Friday night. They would eat rice Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, come back Monday morning and rescan, and we could show them where they grew visceral fat from Friday to Monday. It's that accurate that we could see that. So these changes happen pretty quickly, but so does the change when you start eliminating visceral fat. So you can change it very quickly. Like for instance, this guy here is filled with visceral fat, and you should be able to see that it's reduced just a little bit, but it's not just the quantity. The quality of this visceral fat is also changing, meaning it's not as inflammatory. And this is about 2 months difference between here to here. And you can see his face when this scan was taken. You can see his face when this scan was taken, and they look like completely different people. With the elimination of even just a little bit of visceral fat, you change faces. So very short order, days, weeks, months, easily, we can reduce this visceral fat, both in the quantity and the quality of it, and it manifests in faces. So here's another face. I don't think this is new since our last show. This guy came to us, and 3 months, look how much he's improved his face from here to here. I'll try to stay in the middle so you can see those facial changes. So he's a whole different human being by reducing that inflammation in 3 months. Here he is, a CEO of a company. Here he is still a CEO, but a better CEO. And I got a new part-time job as a model. Now this guy is modeling clothes because he improved his appearance so much. So I actually done that quite a bit. Quite a few clients have come to me and we've turned them into older models. Why? Because nobody else, when they're old, looks good anymore, unless they get rid of their visceral fat or never gotten visceral fat to begin with.
Okay, let's talk about the end goal. I did touch on this, but I want to make sure we have a specific answer for people that are going to embrace the strategies. Is the goal to have no visceral fat, or is there a small amount that is still healthy?
So there is no healthy amount of what is disease. So visceral fat is disease. You don't want any disease in here. I tell people, well, how much disease would you like to remain in the body? It's almost like saying, well, how much cancer would you like in there? You want none. So it's not like this stuff is valuable and helpful to you. I will say this. There probably is a teeny tiny bit of fat around the coronary arteries that are beneficial. So when a baby is born, it's got a very little bit of fat around those coronary arteries, but the quality of that fat is very different than what the quality of the fat is when they get to this particular state here. And so it becomes more inflammatory and more pathogenic. So there's the transition. But never, ever, ever think it's good stuff. You want to get rid of it, and you'll never have to worry about like overdoing it. It's disease. So yeah, man, go at it. Get rid of all your visceral fat. Get rid of your muscle fat. And when you get rid of your muscle fat, we're not telling you to get rid of all your fat altogether. You want a little bit of subcutaneous fat, a little bit around, because this subcutaneous fat has a protective benefit. Superficial subcutaneous fat is very different from deep subcutaneous fat because of that molecule of adiponectin, which is another area of knowledge that big pharma doesn't want you to know about. But adiponectin, adiponectin, I'm sure Jesse will put it in his show notes.
Yep.
It has a protective quality against heart attacks, strokes, obesity, cancer, neurodegenerative conditions, so Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, MS. It's just very, very protective against those conditions. So you need to almost think about the superficial layer of fat is like a bulletproof vest that you have on and that you want. And you know who has a lot of superficial subcutaneous fat are children. They're very healthy, cute. You like to look at babies' feet and toes and their arms. Children have very beautiful looking limbs and beautiful faces because they have the perfect amount of subcutaneous fat, superficial subcu fat. And then 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds are losing their subcutaneous fat. So an interesting, picture just came out yesterday, and I'll see if of Liver King, and Liver King was standing up, and he has no superficial subcutaneous fat in his face at all. I actually, unfortunately, don't have it readily to grab, but bodybuilders lose their superficial subcutaneous fat in favor of having striated muscles. And then you see their tortuous blood vessels, their veins are very diseased and twisted. And they look at it so much, they think it's healthy. It's like a group of anorexics getting together and looking at each other's skinny bodies without muscle or fat and thinking that's healthy. So if you're in the bodybuilder community, I would tell you, rescue yourself. A recent study came out that showed the incidence of sudden cardiac death, meaning death, mortality, for an amateur bodybuilder is about 10 to 15 times greater than a couch potato. Wrap your head around that. An amateur bodybuilder is 10 to 15 times greater chance of having a sudden cardiac event where they die than an average couch potato, an average person. And if you're a professional bodybuilder, are you ready for this? 90 to 180 times the risk of sudden cardiac death. I mean, this is a super dangerous. It may be, I did a post on it. It may be literally the most dangerous form of competition that you can get involved in. I think I'd rather do, duels with pistols. It's just that dangerous to lose your superficial subcutaneous fat. And then they're increasing their visceral fat within their muscles. And it's remarkable, all these big boys and big girls that do this aren't getting an MRI scan. They just get a stupid DEXA scan, and it doesn't measure the fat in their muscle and fat around their heart. Well, no, man, I'll tell you, I'm good. No, I'm healthy, man. I'll go rip you up and, I'll go lift you up. I can lift way more than you. Dummy! You don't know what's going on around your heart. Get an MRI. See how healthy you are. See what your risk is. I mean, you can't lie with these studies that show these people are dropping dead. And now there's a lot more to it. It's not like lifting weights causes it. It's this body dysmorphia that they lift. When they lift in that competitive way, they're also doing steroids. They're doing performance enhancing drugs. They're abusing hormones, insulin, trying to get an insulinogenic response and growth hormone and all sorts of exogenous substances. And so there's a lot of contributing factors definitely going into it. I don't want to suggest lifting weights is the danger. It's the lifestyle. But what's being ignored is a lack of superficial subcutaneous fat. And they end up they accelerate their aging. The truth is, when you look at these arms and look at the limbs of these people, and there's this one guy off, here's an example, this one guy off the internet, I just saw it today. See this tortuous, a lack of subcutaneous fat in these tortuous vessels that are in there. What it's doing is basically accelerating disease. And I like to say, wow, man, cool. Look at those veins. Wow, you can really see them. You know what it reminds me of? The 90-year-olds that come into the ER. They were dying of strokes and cancer and having all these problems. They literally have lost all their superficial subcutaneous fat. So we just had kind of put out there, in social media and marketing that, bodybuilders, lack of subcutaneous fat, that's what you want. It's not what you want. You want to have this superficial layer of fat, and you want to have it in your face so that you can see this nice look, not inflammation. And maybe one quick, I'll show you this example. I think it'd be really powerful to show this to you.
Perfect. While you're pulling that up, I'll ask you a question about this subcutaneous fat. So you talked about bodybuilders, but that's a special population. Say it's a 90-year-old coming to the ER. If they're lacking this healthy fat, what are average people doing to lose that?
Average people, what's contributing to it, the loss of is basically chronic disease. So we see people in poor lifestyle choices, eating processed foods, stress, poor sleep, a lack of access to good, wholesome, nutrient-dense meat, and a lack of optimizing their microbiome. The loss and deterioration of their microbiome's health causes visceral adiposity, heart fat, muscle fat, and a lack of subcutaneous fat. So this guy here caused this from poor lifestyle, improved it. And this is his abdomen. I showed those before, his legs. But look at his face, okay? How much this is him when he had all that visceral fat. This is him today. So take a look at this. This was brand new. I didn't share this last time, but look at these two scans. Very powerful. So these two individuals are two different males. They're actually, related. They both have different amounts of visceral fat. Now imagine what their faces look like. Just imagine. I'm going to show you, they're going to have higher levels of inflammation because of this visceral fat. And it's just an exercise. But now I'm going to show you, in those few seconds, I'm going to show you now what their faces really look like next to the respective scans. Can you see it?
Yeah.
These are kids. So this kid has got this full inflamed face and these kind of tired looking eyes. And this kid has this full looking face as well. And not a great look. But now, Jesse, and everybody listening, watch this. Watch what happens when these children who've been scanned get educated about their visceral fat with their parents. And the whole family works to get rid of visceral fat. Look at what happens to these kids' faces. This kid goes from here to here. And this kid goes from here to here. So while they're looking like average kids, now they look like they could be child models and, do advertising. And it's because in 6 months of losing their visceral fat, they've improved blood flow from their thin, teeny tiny lips to now look at that perfusion, the healthy level of blood flow to those lips, and the increased saturation of their hemoglobin molecule with oxygen gives them super red, healthy lips. how much they improved their lips. And what do women want to do? Red lipstick to try to look healthy, to attract us, and red fingernail polish and red toenail polish to have that kind of appearance. They don't know why. They're not saying, well, geez, I got to get a little bottle of this red color enamel because I need to increase the appearance of my hemoglobin saturation with oxygen in case I encounter a male. They have no idea. They're just biologically wired to know that they should have healthy nail beds that look red and that it catches more guys' eyes. But this is what happens in children. And the parents of these boys wanted their images shared with the world so that everybody else becomes aware of visceral fat in children and the influence that visceral fat has in lives. So if you're a parent and you got kids and your kids have little full faces, why in the world aren't you helping them out and finding out about disease in your child's life and getting rid of it? And in your own life, because if it's in your kids, it's going to be in you.
Okay, coming back to superficial fat, you made it clear there that when we take care of visceral fat, that'll balance out in a healthy way too. So good news, it's not a separate thing. We take care of the health of the body, we lose the visceral fat, we maintain a healthy level of that superficial fat.
That's correct. It really is the case when you get rid of visceral fat. We notice by MRIs that the health of the body improves and people preserve their superficial subcutaneous fat. So we have this tremendous benefit that shows where one bad fat goes away, one good fat actually is preserved and increases. And I've never seen an exception to it. I've never seen somebody lose all their visceral fat and then lose their superficial subcu fat, or the opposite. Somebody loses their superficial subcutaneous fat and doesn't lose their visceral fat is not the exact opposite. So this ability to increase superficial subcutaneous fat is a natural consequence when you get rid of visceral fat and you improve the health of the body. That's key, exactly how you say it. Improve the health of the body, and it optimizes your tissues. It gets rid of bad, dangerous inflammatory fat. And it actually, the other thing interesting happens, even without exercising, is muscle grows. Muscle increases, even when somebody refuses to exercise. We think it's just because of walking, getting out of chairs, getting in and out of cars. There's always some kind of physical activity, and your muscles will improve if you get rid of the inflammatory fat that's inside of those muscles. They'll start to recover and start growing. So it's a really important strategy, is optimizing your health so you get rid of these dangerous fat depots and get the good beneficial fat, a superficial subcu fat, into your body. Here's one other picture I'll show you. This guy, very interesting, Jesse. You ready for some more interesting science Dr. Sean's figured out?
For sure.
This guy came to me in January of this year. This is Don. Don's a great guy. He's 86 years old. And he came to me and he pretty much talked just how he looks there. He had kind of a slow way of talking and kind of a flat affect, not very animated, not joke around, very serious Don, 86 years old. And when you think about your experience of being honest, 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds are very serious. They're kind of a flat affect. They're not laughing and joking around. There's not a lot of animation. There's not a lot of expressivity where they show facial expressions. They're on a completely different plane, and who's completely the opposite to like 89-year-olds? Babies. You can stay at a baby and they change their expressions all the time. And it's like pure gold. When they smile, it's wonderful. And when they got a sad look, it looks like the saddest look in the world. It's incredible, breaks your heart. And when they get startled, it's this crazy startle look. Their expressivity is a reflection of their health. And the lack of expressivity in America is the expression, is the manifestation of disease. It's not old age. So guess what happened to Don? He became more animated. He now jokes around. He is almost like inappropriate. Why do I say he's inappropriate? Because 80-year-olds, and this guy Don is now 87, aren't supposed to be animated, expressive, and joking around. When was the last time you saw a 90-year-old up on a stage and really funny? They lose their sense of humor. And we can even tell you through AI, I've researched and pulled the studies, it's the basal ganglia that is diseased and is falling apart. And I'm going to say from the influence of visceral fat, deteriorating that. And as you eliminate it, they get it back. And so we're turning our older population, the clients that come to us, into more healthy, expressive levels. They're animated. They're back to enjoying life as that inflammation leaves. And it shows up in their face, in their animations, their expressions, how they walk, how they perform. And this is the holy grail of health. And let me just ask you a blunt question. Who here watching has ever seen that happen from cholesterol or any lab? Never. And you never will. Get rid of this fat, and that's what you're going to do. You're going to take diseased old people, get rid of this dangerous fat, and you'll revive them, giving them a renaissance, and they come back to life. That's what we're going to do. I'm working before I die to get this to America, help them understand these really critical areas of fat. The holy grail of health is following this fat and getting rid of it. Nothing will give you a better return, nothing on your health, nothing will improve your human being more.
Okay, we've gone over why this fat is so bad, how it accumulates. Why is the body making it if it is so toxic to itself?
Yeah, the same way to look at is why does the body make disease? Well, disease happens from poor living. It's not like the body is being willful about it. It won't make that visceral fat if you live correctly. But what's happening is your microbiome is changing, being destroyed, and you're getting too much a collection of bad metabolites from your microbiome and bad metabolites from your metabolism, how you're literally on a cellular level functioning, your physiology, and it's just producing this structural manifestation of structural disease, fat around your heart, fat within your muscle, fat within your abdomen. And in the absence of that deterioration, you would never get that fat. Those fat depots would never form. So it is a consequence of just incorrect living. And what it says is, I'm living wrong, I'm living poorly, and it declares to everybody how your appearance. But when you encounter older people that are healthy, you're like, wow, that guy is healthy. And that's why we're attracted to healthy looking people. We want to hang around them and we want to pay more attention to them. If you're a man or woman and you're leading an organization, you will be a better influencer if you improve your health. And the best impact is going to be get rid of this fat. You'll improve your face and be a better leader. Like that CEO that changed his face so dramatically that became a model. Who would doubt his ability to lead that company better now based on his appearance? And commensurate with that improvement in the appearance of his face and his body is his ability to lead. His performance in terms of leadership qualities and running that company are significantly enhanced. I'll just come out and say it's 2025. In the future, political elections will be guided by health. You will see super PACs taking candidates and get rid of this fat. Are you involved in a PAC? You never thought about that, have you? Never thought about health and influence in a political election. And you never thought about it if you're a headhunter looking for the best leader to head up a corporation. You never thought about their health. You're looking at their CV and their bios, but what the most exploitable advantage is the healthy man and the healthy woman. And if you got existing leadership, you're the primary shareholder of a company, If I was a primary shareholder of a company, instead of being a retired Army colonel with no money to invest in a company, I would be looking to optimize the biology of the key people in that C-suite, the CEO, CFO, COO, CTO, all those C-suites I'd be biologically optimizing to run that company better. And that would be far better strategies to improve that company performance. So elections, business executives, politicians, leaders of organizations, social media, health influencers like yourself. That's why you do well, Jesse. Your attractive look. If you got out on this stage and you had a big, egg and muffin face, big fat face and all inflamed, you think you'd have a lot of people, following you in this space? No. You ask intelligent questions. You figure out things faster than most people as a host because you're truly healthier than more people. And so it equates to better performance. But we can refine you better. You make it big. You get, come work in our medical practice. We'll tune you up even more.
Well, let's talk about that. We can use me as an example. We can use John Doe. Somebody looks in the mirror after they've tuned in here. They see that big inflamed face. They're assuming they're full of visceral fat and all the other bad kinds of fat. They go to see you, get an MRI, confirm what they already basically know from looking at themselves. What are the steps to fix this? We haven't gotten into that piece yet. So somebody knows they're broken, they're full of visceral fat. How do they begin to walk out of this?
I get all kinds of people coming to C-levels, major corporations. I got a couple cabinet members of the president's cabinet. People, all walks of life, and like high performers, professional athletes. People have different motivations and different capabilities for what they're capable of taking on. So I give them as much as they're capable of doing and applying in their lives to help them out. The first and foremost thing I tell them to do is stop eating processed foods. Most humans are able to stop eating processed foods if you give them healthy food to eat, healthy meat, and I get people eating healthy fermented vegetables. But sometimes people can't start on the fermented vegetables. They got to eat healthy meat and broccoli and some of these other vegetables. I just get them to stop. We just stop eating the carrot cake and the glazed donuts. We start there and cut out processed foods. And then we start rolling back the bad influencers besides processed foods like stress, alcohol, poor sleep. And then one we haven't talked about this particular show, but we've addressed in the past, durational exercise. And people don't like hearing this, but like the bodybuilders don't like it when I go after them, because of their lifestyle and their particular forms of competition. If you're a competitive distance runner or a competitive cyclist where you're running long, cycling long distances, like going for the gold jersey, whatever that big bicycle rake is that Lance Armstrong was always winning.
Tour de France.
The Tour de France. That's exactly right. Sorry. Then you're going to accumulate more of this fat inside your body. But where do you not have it? Outside your body. Because when this fat accumulates inside, around your heart, in your muscles, and in your abdomen, it's being stripped away in the superficial. So they're really scrawny. And so marathoners, world-class marathoners, or people who have done marathons for decades are scrawny. They have low muscle and they have low superficial subcutaneous fat. Those cyclists have the scrawniest arms ever. Pathetic. They look like 8-year-old girl arms, and or 12-year-old boy arms. Just very scrawny. It doesn't have anything to do with the sex. It's just they look like children arms. Their legs are massive. They have hypertrophied their legs, but all of the inflammation that they have goes to sarcopenia, loss of muscle, and a loss of the superficial subcutaneous fat. So durational exercise is bad, stress is bad, alcohol is bad, poor sleep is bad. Those are big contributors. And then we get them eating healthy meat, and then we get them to do beneficially short bursts of stress. That which does not kill you and is not sustained is beneficial. So things like sprinting and fighting, the fight or flight scenario. sympathomimetic blasts, short periods of time, and you're done. So we get, some of those beneficial stress hormetics, some cold plunging, some saunas, some sunshine, some fasting, and then some maximum intensity exercise, fight or flight, those kind of things, and you'll begin to turn yourself around. But you really want to get those metrics. You want to get a baseline scan before you do this and see where your level of disease is, and then start the strategy, start improving yourself. And we got the most experience in the world. Right now, we're the best in the world. But I'll be honest with you, why is my practice the best in the world at this, getting the best results? Not because we're the smartest. We've just been doing it longer. Nobody else is. But for God's sakes, I want competition. I want other men and women to find out about this, because it's a big world. I can't take care of this world. I got 5 other doctors working with me, to help me out with all the people coming to me now. But listen, every medical practice in the world needs to know about these dangerous collections of fat, and almost none of them do. Go talk to a doctor. Can you please help me identify my fat around my heart and how to get rid of it? Well, that'll be a short discussion for sure.
All right, let's go a lot deeper into the diet piece. The basics are no processed foods. We know the microbiome matters. You mentioned fasting. Let's start out talking about your latest diet and what a day looks like.
What I recommend typically for my client patients, the ultimate diet, what I've found, Jesse, and people working one-on-one, doing a study multiple times, they do the study called an N of 1, where I just study one person. And, the most interesting and important study, an N of 1, is a study that's done on you. So, if you have if you're the study subject, that gives you the most relevance, because it's all about what happened to you. Did you improve or did you worsen? And it turns on your targets, what you're following. So when it comes to the most important targets, the visceral fat, heart fat, muscle fat, deep subcutaneous fat, and the good stuff, muscle and superficial subcutaneous fat, what we have found to optimize those different structural targets, 4 of which are structural disease, 1 is beneficial tissue, or 2, muscle and superficial subcutaneous fat, is putting people on what I call the living carnivore diet. So it's the carnivore diet plus, not fruit and honey, fermented foods that are living with microbes. You could almost do this with just living water, like taking water from a glacier or a really pristine lake that has a zillion microbes floating around in that water in a symbiotic relationship. And that living water would consumed with meat would contribute to a better impact on your microbiome and a faster reduction of these dangerous fat depots than if you just ate meat. Now, how about my vegan fellow human beings that are eating vegan and vegetarian? What about that? Because they're rolling their eyes and they're just so passionate about fat. Well, I'm sorry that in every study that we looked at, meat accelerated the loss of these dangerous fats more quickly and more efficiently than the addition, like taking a carnivore person or somebody on this standard American diet that was omnivorous and eating just crappy food, meat and crappy vegetables and processed foods. If we put them on the pure vegan diet, they did, cut back on visceral fat and heart fat, but we could get them to accelerate that elimination, staying vegan, by adding in the living portion of the diet, fermented foods. So if you're a vegan, cut out the processed foods. Quit kidding yourself that you're eating some kind of carrot cake muffin in the morning. It doesn't have any meat. Please, there's no animal product in this muffin, is there? And quit kidding yourself. It's disease causing. And substitute in, from your whole vegetables and what you're eating, fermented vegetables, fermented foods, and you will you'll expedite the eliminate of visceral fat in your muscle, fat within your adjuvant. So whatever dietary strategy you are going to center on and start with, just adding in living cultured food, probiotic fermented foods, and not processed capsules, probiotic capsules. They're blowing up out there. I think I heard that supplements now have actually eclipsed pharmaceutical medicine. That people are buying more supplements than big pharma is selling medication. Because people want to change, and they're putting their pocketbook and hope in capsules. But what you really want to put your hope in is in lifestyle. So that's what I'd recommend for diet. The living carnivore diet. The other way I sum it up is meat and microbes. You want to eat meat, the healthiest meat possible, with these beneficial microbes. And it's just the biggest criticism I have on our diet today is that regardless of whether you're vegan, vegetarian, or pure carnivore, we don't get these microbes into our bodies and on our bodies. That's what's missing. The microbiome, the collection of healthy microbes, mostly beneficial ones you want in your body and living on your body, is completely devoid of where we used to be 50,000 years ago.
We'll come back to the microbiome, but I want to stick on the vegan piece here. Point blank, have you ever scanned a healthy vegan? Or have you taken somebody that has a lot of visceral fat, they're committed to that diet, and then seen them get down to zero or near zero where you are?
I've never seen a vegan get that low. They seem, I think it's because probably the sheer volume of food you got to eat when you're vegan, as opposed to, a very nutrient dense, smaller amount of meat. Vegans are eating larger volumes of things, that it's metabolically taxing. It's hard. You never see a piece of meat left in residual stool. If you defecate in the toilet, you never see, well, look, there's a little bit of my ribeye from last night. Meat is easily digested. We're designed to metabolize it, digest it very quickly. But very frequently you see vegetative matter residually still going through because it's taxing and it's hard to digest it. So I think the sheer physiological demands of the larger volumes of these more difficult, forms of food that people are eating makes it harder for them to really optimize their microbiome, and two, to eliminate that visceral fat. They looked at sequencing of microbes and also simultaneously markers of inflammation in the bloodstream. And I've already talked about how I don't like seeing that, but at least in these two groups of people, they looked at people that were eating a more, animal-based kind of keto diet, ones that were eating, more vegetables and grains and fruit and stuff. And the sequencing shocked everybody that the microbes were more diverse in the more carbohydrate, a limited, restricted diet with a more meat base, and than they were in the fruit and vegetables and grain diet. And then secondly, the markers of inflammation, I think there were, if I remember correctly, there were like 10 to 20 markers. Every one of them was lower in the more keto meat-based diet group. And every one of them and the grains and carbohydrates, diverse group of fruits and vegetables and grains, every marker was unchanged. There was no improvement. So it really kind of startles the researchers and anybody who found that study, because the proposition that you actually increase your diversity of your microbes by decreasing the diversity of your diet. And you also simultaneously reduce the level of inflammation, at least in these temporary markers. Now, having just said that in the beginning, all of those inflammatory markers are present, are subject to confounding. But when you have so many people doing that, it reduces the potential for confounding. It helps to make it a little bit more reliable. But again, I'm trying to sell people on the N of one. Pay more attention about what's going on inside your body than what's going on inside studies of everybody else's.
Let's talk about hierarchy of meat. There's different types of meat, different cuts, different qualities. What's at the very top? And then what are the different meats that you eat?
Yeah. First of all, I like to eat the healthiest animal possible. Our ancestors, our great, 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 great grandparents, when they hunted, would hunt the very best animal in the herd, bison, or if I said enough greats, maybe megafauna, the woolly mammoth, which we hunted to extinction. So we definitely had a preference for eating woolly mammoths. That was some really good meat because we didn't hunt anything else to extinction. So the woolly mammoth got hunted to extinction at a good source of meat. We would hunt the very best member of that herd because we learned that it was a higher nutrient value, and we paid attention to the fact, the impact when we were selective about that animal which we hunted, it impacted our health more. And so I try to leverage that principle today in modern day hunting, so to speak, by taking my client patients with me to shop with Sean. I call it shopping with Sean. We're going to go shop with Sean, which means we're going to do some hunting, okay? Our weapons are going to be in our brain. We're going to use our senses to identify the single best cut of meat in this gigantic butcher counter. And then I take them through the characteristics of the different types of meat that are in there to help them get selected. So first and foremostly, you don't want to have a marbleized piece of meat. You don't want to be eating marbleized steak. So the example of this I give is in human beings. When I found out about this biomarker, this is an Olympic sprinter who has very low levels of myosteatosis. They do not have a lot of marbleization going on in their muscle, nor do they have it in their muscle of their abdomen. So you can see how pure this muscle is. It doesn't have any of that white streaks that this muscle up here has. That laid down of that inflammatory fat, muscle fat, fatty muscle replacement, myosteatosis. And look at it here. It doesn't look like a ribeye. It looks like Wagyu beef. And so this is disease in a human. It's disease in a cow. And nobody's talking about it. I got veterinarians who are clients. And they go, my God, I wish I could go back. They're retired now. I wish I could go back and be a veterinarian, knowing what I've learned from you. I'd be completely different. The vets agree with me. They're as jacked up and messed up as us allopathic physicians. They're trained to make money off these sick cows. And they told me, I never made money off grass-fed cows. I didn't get called on them. I only got called on the grain-fed cows, the ones that were fed corn and grains and molasses. And today, sadly, dirty little secret, the ranchers are now feeding cows candy, human candy. It's one of the largest source of diversion of human candy in the industry is to cattle. Why? To cause this. So basically, Wagyu beef comes from, a breed of cattle that has a disease called myosteatosis, that manifestation. And then they're doing whatever they can to increase that muscle, that fat within the muscle to get more weight. And because the consumers, by and large, go and they buy that marbleized steak because Ruth, Chris, waiters, and everybody in a steakhouse, well, madam, this steak has a beautiful marbleization pattern that gives it an exquisite nonsense. It's a diseased animal. You don't want to bring it into your body. You want to be eating the animal that has a lean appearance to it and then super healthy fat on the outside. Believe me, I'm a fat lover. I eat the healthy fat, but I know what bodies of fat are good, which is the superficial subcutaneous fat. And then I stay away from the myosteatosis. But I'm the only doctor, and besides in my practice now I'm teaching to, that figured it out first in humans. And if you saw this guy's legs, and this guy's abdomen, if you saw what his body looked like, you'd be like, Oh my God, I don't want to look like that. You don't want to act like that. This guy has a hard time getting out of the chairs. He can't sprint. He can't do hardly anything. This guy's an Olympic sprinter, world-class sprinter. So you want muscles like this. You want to eat meat that looks like that. No marbleization. So here's a little tip. You can go to a website, free commercial, because you're watching Jesse Chappis. Grab a pen and paper, go to this website, Piedmontese.com. Piedmontese. Piedmontese is a breed of cattle. It was bred. It has the lowest amount of marbleization out there. And you can go and use this code and buy it because you're watching Jesse. And now you're automatically thinking, okay, here comes some sales pitch. You ready? I'm not making any money. I promote this cattle because I am just sharing it to humanity. And I told them, I don't even get free meat from them. I get nothing from them. Nothing. No money. Okay. So trust me, I'm sharing this because it'll help you out. Use this code DRSEAN25. Dr. Sean 25. DRSEAN25. You'll get 25% off, not your first order. You ready? 25% off every order you take for the rest of your life when you use that code. That's how good, this, because all the money's going to you. Nothing goes to Dr. Sean. I'm promoting because it's that good. So it's the lowest amount of marbleization, grass-fed, grass-finished. And until I find a better, source of meat out there, I'm going to promote them and tell my followers and my client patients to get that meat. So now you just say you're going to love that. Your audience are going to love that. And say, well, God, I'm glad I watched Jesse.
So when it comes to your diet, percentage-wise, how much is beef? And then what are your favorite cuts?
Great question. So I by far prefer ruminant animals. And the reason is ruminants ferment vegetables, grass and plants, and they magically transform that grass, carbohydrates, and the phytonutrients locked up into that vegetable into a healthier form of rich, nutrient-dense protein and fats that we humans basically get the plants and vegetables that have been better processed for us in the form of the flesh of that animal, fat and super healthy muscle. So I would say virtually 90 to 95%, I'd say 95% of what I eat is red meat from ruminants. I don't favor pork or even chicken because they're more inflammatory, not as healthy. The next thing I would eat more I guess occasionally I'll eat a really pastured chicken. It doesn't taste particularly, soft and, like the conventional type you almost get used to. But I will occasionally might eat a real pastured chicken. They're not sold, you really, except for their eggs. There are more layers in the industry, as a practice goes. The other form of meat that I eat, and it's not really a meat, is fish. I eat a lot of seafood that's wild caught. So you want animals that are grass-fed, grass-finished, not finished with grain and corn and soy and candy, but same thing with farmed fish. They're fed those kind of crazy diets too. And I don't care if they're in a big net and in an ocean, they're farmed and they're not eating in a natural, completely natural environment or a natural source. Nature gives them the best instincts, what they should be going around, swimming around, eating. So I eat only wild-caught seafood, wild-caught fish, wild-caught oysters, clams, shrimp, lobster, crab, like that. But I don't eat anything farmed. I got a second practice site down in Florida. So when I'm in Florida, I'm eating fresh seafood, probably, 2, sometimes 3 days a week, but every other, all the other days. And even when I am eating seafood, those days I'm still eating ruminant meat, and I always consume fish or meat, regardless, concomitantly with ferments to get those living microbes into my diet.
And are you still chewing those together? The way it was
I
before,
do.
it's not just the same meal, but you're actually taking bites and combining the two.
Yeah. So I co-masticate. The medical term for chewing is mastication. Use the masticators, your muscles of mastication to chew. And I'm mixing in. So you should be able to tell if you just eat meat, swallow it, then you eat ferments and swallow it. They're kind of like next to each other. But if you mix it in together, all of the bacteria, those living beneficial microbes from the fermented food, are surrounding perfectly that meat. And now you're delivering it in a completely different form. It's basically a mass of chewed up meat with saliva and enzymes from your salivary glands, parotid glands, and your beneficial microbes that you're putting in together, and it causes this really great bolus of food that goes down and contributes positively to your gastrointestinal tract. So, very, very important to chew in that manner. And the other point I'll make is when you do that, you lose this visceral adiposity. You improve your appearance. I'm 62 years old. I'm in phenomenally good shape for a 62-year-old man. And I can hear visceral adiposity when people talk to me. And you'll hear it in older people. They get a voice and just kind of get a little raspy. And I've been head of this company for this particular way, and they get a little bit older, and I'm getting ready to retire. Younger people are going to have to lead the way of this company. That's visceral adiposity affecting the laryngeal tissues, and it actually changes the intonation of your voice. And it's why we lose singers and performers and actors. Their appearance degrades and their voices degrade. But if we could educate the performing art community and everybody, not just business leaders and athletes, but the performers arts, we would have the treasure of their singing and their performing arts a lot longer. So it's really important. Anybody knows a famous singer, get to them. I will work to them for free just to increase public awareness about these dangerous fats that everybody else is completely ignoring.
And I know when it comes to fermented foods, diversity is key for you. You have a lot of different ferments in your fridge. Is the idea there to get different microbes from different ferments that'll then populate in your system?
Yeah. So I give people just an example. I tell them you want to basically recreate Noah's Ark, the Bible story about Noah and all the diverse animals, 2 of every species. You don't really need a lot of these ferments. You need more of a variety. So think less quantity, more quality, and diversity to the different types of ferments. So in my refrigerator, you're exactly right. I have about 30 different types of fermented foods in there, 30 different types of jars. So the only thing in my refrigerator, really, honest to God, is meat and fermented vegetables. There's nothing else in there. Fermented foods. So that would include fermented dairy. So blue cheeses, gorgonzolas, roqueforts, aged Goudas, aged cheddars, Parmesan Reggiano. I got these, old world style cheese, but not Kraft American singles. Okay. That's just processed crap. That's like, milk solids and chemicals pressed in some kind of a weird way. And God knows how they make that stuff, but it's not fermented aged cheese the way, our great grandparents did in Europe and whatever. So you want to get those aged dairy, fermented dairy, yogurt, plain, unsweetened, whole milk, full fat, not processed. I don't even like Greek style yogurt because they're taking out the whey. They're changing it. It's really just a processed form to make it more palatable and more creamier in its texture. But, they're taking away a portion of what nature has intended and purpose to be in there. So I have a ton of fermented vegetables, fermented products, fermented dairy, and meat in my refrigerator, and nothing else.
When I buy fermented vegetables, as long as I'm buying them from the fridge, I assume, and I look at the label, that they're not pasteurized. With dairy, other than a couple of the cheeses that are marked otherwise, usually, if not always, it's marked pasteurized. So when you're buying,
Yes.
say, a kefir, a yogurt, are you assuming they're pasteurizing and then fermenting after? Or just a lot of the bacteria has been killed when it is pasteurized? It's always been a question of mine. What are you actually getting from the fermented dairy once they pasteurize it?
So I've looked into it. As far as an industry standard goes, it's pre-fermentation. They pasteurize that milk. So what that means is they're taking milk that's largely commercially available to them, that's pasteurized, and then they add select cultures of microbes to that pasteurized milk to ferment it into yogurt or to make kefir or to make blue cheese or some kind of aged Gouda or aged cheddar. So it's always pre-fermentation. I suppose some knucklehead could make a cheese or kefir or yogurt and try pasteurizing it again afterwards, but then it would kill the beneficial cultures that have been allowed to grow in there. But I'm not aware of a single commercial operation that does it that way. It would be completely unnecessary. It would add expense, and it would likely detract from the palatability, Jesse, I think, of that product. So I don't think you ever have to worry about it. If you're buying something, like a kefir or yogurt, it's going to be only pasteurized pre-fermentation. And the other thing I would say, about that is that you have in the consumer market, you can take cheeses that are made from raw milk and you can ferment. And you can't do that yet with yogurt or kefir in some states where they have laws against raw milk, that hasn't been pasteurized. But I'm not aware of a single state that doesn't allow cheese because it's so aged and it's so protected against being sold raw cheese, raw milk, aged. The pathogenicity is no longer a threat in raw aged cheeses. So I think we might get there eventually with yogurt and fermentation too, but those aren't as aged nearly as long and not and so the carbohydrate reduction generally is not as great, and so pathogenicity would be slightly higher or at least moderately higher in something like a yogurt or a kefir product because the fermentation would not be as complete. So very interesting questions. I think, and another point I would just opine on with regard to fermented dairy products as opposed to fermented vegetables is we're seeing some very interesting studies where fermented dairy has some powerful impact on diseases, and particularly like ALS. And we're seeing certain species, I think it's, if I remember, HLA 214, if I remember the correct species, 214 sticks in my head more, H214 maybe, that is aligned with significant improvement when it comes to reduction in symptomatology with Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS. And so I think these microbes, as we find out about them more and more, portend new areas of research where natural strategies can be very beneficial and helpful with disease mitigation, maybe disease eradication, and certainly from the perspective of prevention. I think if we're seeing some diminishment in symptomatology, it may also be very helpful for the motivated human being to be consuming it to maybe avert the advent and onset of these serious diseases in the first place. In other words, get your kids eating these fermented products and fermented dairy especially to help reduce the risk for these really bad players of chronic disease.
Interesting. And I know in general, you're not a fan of unfermented dairy. You talked about the carbohydrate content there quickly. So do you have any regular milk? And what about things like heavy cream and half and half?
Yeah, I've abandoned consuming. I used to drink raw milk, but it is very rich in carbohydrates. And my opinion about this, and I'm not, I'm a scientist, and I have to say, I'm trying to find the very best strategies. I'm convinced about, visceral fat and these other areas, and meat and microbes. But when it comes to dairy, my current opinion is I don't think adults should be consuming dairy unless it's fermented. And the position for that is that's what babies do. Babies can actually ferment dairy in a way that human adults can't. So they're basically better thought of as little fermentation factories. And they have a different species of microbes, particularly if they're breastfed. And it's commensal. They have this symbiotic relationship between the mother, especially to the extent the mother's healthy, that the baby's acquiring microbes from the mother, and the baby is also sharing microbes with the mother as it's involved in lactation and breastfeeding. So it's this bidirectional exchange of microbes occurring in a very sophisticated manner. And these microbes and the milieu, the composition of the microbes within the healthy infant gut allows it to process milk perfectly and to ferment through fermentation it into a product that really allows it to be optimally absorbed. And that I'm going to guess too, I mean, I don't know. I have to ask this, wonder about this. I think adults would have this fondness of holding babies in part because I think in the past they shared those microbes with us when they would spit up and they would have diarrhea. I mean, we didn't have diapers before. These babies would make a mess. And I almost imagine, these microbes would somehow not imagine, I know they would, if they get on a human being, they're going to get inside the human being. You're going to get, unless you sterilize your hands. And that wasn't happening back, 20,000 years ago. So I think babies are very unusual in their ability to metabolize, and adults should not be consuming dairy because we're just not going to be as good about it. But, it might be possible down the road to acquire some microbes that allow us to potentially ferment dairy and consume it in a non-fermented form where you might be able to enjoy ice cream. And then to your question about heavy cream, I've abandoned that too. I've noticed that I tend to have a slow accumulation of visceral adiposity with the consumption, even of heavy cream, even though it has minimal amount of microbes. I don't know. It had this strange kind of almost attraction to it, and not quite an addiction, but cravings would be a fair way of describing it. So I recommend not consuming heavy cream, and even this kind of popular trend. Some people in the carnivore community want to eat carnivore ice cream, where it's just heavy cream and egg yolks that are basically kind of creamed up together, and it might taste super yummy, but I think it's probably best avoided. Now, what I would do is take that and ferment it. Now, I think that would be very interesting to kind of have a fermented ice cream, fermented fats. And I think that'd be very interesting, kind of like frozen sour cream. I make my own sour cream. I ferment my own sour cream, and it's wonderful. In fact, it tastes way better than store-bought. And I don't have cravings for it. I like it. I consume it with meat. I find, I consume it like a garnish, like I would any other ferments, like kimchi, kvass, fermented sauerkraut, or fermented carrots, or whatever vegetables, I'm choosing, fermented beets and whatnot to add to the meat. I add a little bit of thin layer of fermented homemade, Dr. Sean sour cream, and it's really fantastic as just kind of instead of like ketchup or steak sauce, I put fermented sour cream, on my steak, and it's fantastic.
One of the other things I've heard you talk about more recently in the fermented dairy realm is L-reuteri yogurt. That was originally popularized by Dr. William Davis. So talk about that inclusion and what you've noticed there.
Yeah, God bless Bill Davis. I think he's right about L-reuteri. Now, he's persistent. He found out about it. He's done a lot of studies, and he's probably the world's expert on L-reuteri application in a clinical setting. There may be some microbiologists that might know anecdotally, from a research standpoint, more nuances about L-reuteri, but to kind of sum it up, it's this particular species of microbes, of which it's just one. Keep this in perspective. Jesse, I think it's worth keeping in perspective, of about 70 trillion. Okay. We got so many of these things inside of us. So L-reuteri is just one. We're going to learn about a lot of other ones. But what's interesting about it is it's aligned generally with better health. It's aligned with a diminishment of sarcopenia. So you have an ability to reduce the amount of muscle atrophy, which means you can preserve your muscle mass a little bit better, taking L-reuteri, and also muscle performance. So the functionality of the muscle is enhanced by the presence and introduction of L-reuteri. And it also improves the production of oxytocin and nitric oxide. So these other beneficial molecules within the body are enhanced in their production, endogenous production within the body. And then it seems to improve in studies empathy. So what it does, it seems to make you a human being with greater empathy. And I would have to say that that's a pretty noble thing. And I think we want to care more about humans and nature. If you care more about you're less selfish, and so you're selfless, and you are more inclined to think about your fellow human being, humanity. Nature wants you to stick around more to make positive contributions to society. So anecdotally with me, I'm just going to share, it's like crazy. I've just found out about this for the past year. I've been doing this L-reuteri. And one of the things about me is I am kind of like on the spectrum. So the new term is like neurodivergent. And when it comes to me, I'd be like, I always say I'm like Mr. Spock, no emotions, no feelings. It could be some drastic emergency in the ER and I would be right on it without an emotional response. And, my wife is like, you have no emotions. You got to feel more for me. You got to feel more for the kids, all this kind of stuff. Now I'm eating this L-reuteri. Oh my God, I feel like I've got a new life. Like suddenly I got this new perspective of my wife, my kids, my patients, my clients in front of me. I'm not kidding. Sometimes I start to cry, when I'm with my client because I see the disease and I want to help them so much. And never before has that happened. And so the one attribution I'm saying has caused this change in me, it's not old age. I think it's the L-reuteri because I am making this L-reuteri and I eat it about how much? About 2 to 3 tablespoons a day. I think there are a lot of people out there, men and women, that are eating too much, including Bill Davis. Bill, if you're listening, you watch this video. I think you're eating too much, man. Your face is big and I think your tummy is big. You only want some of this stuff and you don't want to have a microbiome that's predominant in L-reuteri. You just want it present and not in a deficient form. So remember Noah's Ark, 2 of every species. You don't want half the boat filled with L-reuteri and diversity in the other half. You want to have a small amount. So I shoot for about 2 to 3 tablespoons. And this has got the old colonel tearing up when I'm talking to people. I love my wife. I love my family. Even I feel it. I've always loved them. But I got this empathy. So give it a try. If you never tried it, Google Bill Davis. He's got lots of recipes. It's so simple. Good God, is it simple to make. So find out about it, make it, and you'll see these changes happening to you.
The one change you make in your book versus Bill's recipe is no inulin. So talk about why you omit that.
I think inulin increases the texture and the palatability. But I am not a fan of the fibrotic addition of it. And it tends to be a processed form. And when you process nature, I might take it in a natural form and ferment it naturally and then add it to the yogurt. But the inulin tends to be kind of almost like an added starch, to kind of emulsify or something, add it to make it more creamy and more palatable. And the goal isn't to make this stuff taste good. The goal is to make you better. So quit trying to do a technique to improve the texture and the characteristics from a palatability standpoint. If you keep making it so tasty, you're going to get fat. Like I think is what's going on with Bill. I almost wish somebody shares this with them. It's like, come on, Bill, wake up. I think you're eating too much of that stuff, and the other people. I mean, it seems like those user groups, there are a lot of heavy people. So cut out the inulin. The other thing I do that Bill doesn't do, and I think in the community, is I take my batch and I put it in a pint-sized jar, and then I stick it in the closet for another 3 to 5 days in room temperature, and I ferment it more. And I find that it improves the character and the quality of that. And maybe that's why it's making me cry and making other people just be a little bit more empathetic. It significantly increases the colony counts and reduces the residual carbohydrates even more. So yeah, the Sean O'Meara, Dr. Sean version of the Dr. Bill Davis version of L-reuteri is to do a second fermentation of that and make it even more sour. And I'm getting fantastic results with this L-reuteri. So big thumbs up on L-reuteri.
I know you got to go soon. Couple quick questions, and then I'll let you go. When you mentioned living water earlier, I noticed you alluding to the advantage there being the microbes. And it sounded like these fermented foods you're bringing in may be a hack because the water no longer contains the microbes. Did I catch something you're sharing there between the lines?
100,000%, Jesse Chavez. You nailed it. So the fermented foods today, for most of our existence, we didn't have fermented foods. We kind of figured it out. And they've been enduring for nobody knows quite how long when they started. But they've been around. And I think they're persistent because our bodies of water that we would have been able to access and would have just been drinking out of, we're kind of like dogs. We just drink out of creeks and streams because they weren't polluted. They didn't have a disrupted molecular biology and microcosm, a microbiome of itself. The streams and the rivers and lakes of past were beautiful and optimizing. And we would eat meat and we'd have water and we'd drink it and we'd be eating the meat with these microbes and we'd get microbes off the animal, itself. We would dress it, the hides and all those microbes get all over the meat. Now meat is sterile and disinfectants and chemicals. If you go into a USDA approved processing packaging facilities, like there's sprays and chemicals, everything going everywhere. And so we were missing by eliminating these beneficial microbes. So natural bodies of water are exploitable today. You just got to be selective about it. One that I continue to, offer my opinion about is ocean water. Ocean water is this huge, so literally I live down in Naples, Florida for a substantial portion of the year. And I drink about 2 tablespoons of ocean water every single day. I drink that. And I'm harvesting microbes from this beautiful ocean that I get. Now, to be sure, there are, healthier bodies of water around the globe. I'm a little nervous about maybe drinking in Los Angeles around, city sewer systems or something like that. But little kids go in the water in Los Angeles, they're knocked over by waves, and they're swallowing, half a cup of water, tons of it. They're not dropping dead with diarrheal illnesses and stuff like that. So I think a little bit of ocean water. The other interesting thing I'll share about ocean water is my strategies. I work to optimize the microbiome. So I study, these microbes to achieve the eradication of fat. If you look at one collection of human beings, there's one collection I figured out as researcher that has more exposure to drinking ocean water than anything else. And the one collection of humans that drink more ocean water than any other person are surfers. Surfers. They drink it. Why? They wipe out. Every one of them. They always, go in and they come up choking and coughing. They're swallowing all this water, every one of them. And then let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. How many surfers do you see that are fat and obese?
None that I can think of.
Here's another interesting thing. How many of them are attractive? Come on, girls. Surfer guys are hot. You want to date a surfer if you're a girl. And if you're a guy and some chick is a surfer, they're beautiful. It's just that richness of those microbes going in and optimizing the microbiome. So my closing thought is, your goal as a human being is to optimize your microbiome because it keeps you from forming this fat around your heart, fat in your abdomen, fat in your muscle. And it optimizes your muscles and your health, and it gives you a better quality of life. So the microbiome is everything.
And for surfing, you're going to be in the sun, which is nice. You're going to be grounded when you're in the water. A lot of different benefits there.
There are those other benefits too. But the lifeguards, they're not as nearly as healthy, even they're out in the sun, as those surfers, because the lifeguards aren't drinking the water. There's a lot of funny looking lifeguards, but most of the surfers, and it's really dose dependent. The more of that water gets them, the better they look.
I know you have your source when you're in Florida, but to go one layer deeper on this, if you were surrounded by a couple of bodies of pristine water teeming with microbes, and this is what I was getting at before, do you feel if you're drinking that water on a daily basis, you wouldn't need the fermented vegetables?
Well, that's a precise question. And I think about it all the time. Is it an adequate substitution to the ferments to drink that water? It may have been in the past. I think it was. But I think today, in all sincerity, probably whatever bodies of water we get to just aren't adequate enough for us to get away from ferments. And the ferments, when we add them into the diet, have, Jesse, such a positive contribution and manifestation in our clients when they get started on it that I wouldn't want to risk it just to water. So I'd say do both until we get it figured out. But it's a brilliant question. God, you think like me so much. Yeah, all your questions, you're the best. You ask the very best questions. Love it.
Well, thank you. Last question, I promise.
Yeah.
'Cause I know you got to go. But I want to come back to meat. You eat a lot of ruminant animals, a lot of beef. What about ground beef? Are you a fan? And then I want to make sure I hone in on cuts of meat when it comes to steak. What's your favorite?
Yeah, I do eat a lot of hamburger. I would say probably almost half of what I eat is hamburger, or at least a third of it. So I like hamburger because it's got a lot of good, healthy meat. I get the Pimani's hamburger because all that fat is grass-fed, grass-finished nutrients. So I want to make sure I'm getting a lot of those cuts. And it gives me a little bit more eating tail to nose because hamburger tends to have a lot of grades, a lot of cuts that I otherwise wouldn't be able to get to enjoy. And then my other select cuts, I eat tons of them. I like, tri-tip. I like sirloin. I like ribeye. I like New York strip. If you're going into a restaurant, let's say, and you're not sure about the cut of meat, the conditions of that animal, whether it's grass-fed, grass-finished, I would say spend a little more money and get the filet because it will have a little bit less inflammatory fat. Get the tenderloin or at least the New York strip and then cut the fat cap off, because if that animal is grain fed, it probably that even that subcutaneous fat, the end cap, will be more chances be more inflammatory. So sometimes I do that if I know it's a grain fed kind of animal. So because I'm like crazy committed to my health. But if it's grass fed, grass finished, I'm eating every little bit of fat on that animal if I know it's super healthy, like a Piemonte breed of cattle.
All right, great hack there to end on. Dr. Sean, loved the conversation. Thank you so much. We're going to link up your website, your YouTube channel, your social media, everything in the show notes. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jesse. Appreciate it. As always, happy to come back and share health optimization with you and your audience.
We'll do it again sometime. Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
All these problems we are having right now, all of these have been documented that are reversible just by burning your visceral fat. As a radiologist, I see visceral fat.